So today we are breaking down the incredibly ambitious and, super controversial 20-point peace plan for Gaza that was just announced by President Trump. Some are calling it a historic chance for peace. Others are calling it an impossible ultimatum. So what's the real story here? Let's dig in.
So it all kicked off with this really powerful statement, right? On September 29th, 2025, standing right there with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Trump laid it all out. He framed this plan not as just another ceasefire, but as a total fundamental reset for Gaza's entire future. The message was pretty clear. Business as usual is over.
In safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing.
But to really get a handle on this, you have to ask why this specific plan and why right now? Well, the answer really lies in the devastating situation that this whole thing grew out of.
Look, this plan didn't just appear out of thin air. It's a direct response to almost 2 full years of brutal, grinding conflict that started way back in October 2023. After multiple ceasefires fell apart and the death toll tragically soared past 60,000 people, the pressure from the international community for some kind of definitive solution was just immense.
Okay, so what's actually in this 20-point deal? Let's break down the core pieces, looking at how it's supposed to handle security, government, and the rebuilding of Gaza.
First things first, and this is the most critical part, the terms to actually stop the fighting. It calls for an immediate ceasefire, sure, but here's the catch. It demands a massive concession from Hamas. We're talking complete disarmament and a total surrender of power. In return, Israel would release almost 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and start a phased withdrawal of its troops.
And here's where the insane urgency of this plan becomes crystal clear. This isn't about long, drawn-out negotiations. It demands that all hostages, alive or dead, be returned within just 72 hours of Israel accepting the deal. That is an incredibly tight, high-pressure deadline that's really designed to force a quick decision one way or another. So, let's say the fighting stops. The plan then moves to a complete political overhaul of Gaza. Hamas would be totally out. In their place, you'd have a temporary government of technocrats, these are non-political experts, and, this is huge, a U.S.-led international stabilization force would roll in to handle security and oversee a pretty controversial de-radicalization program.
And finally, the plan tries to paint a picture for the future. It promises a massive international aid package to rebuild Gaza's completely shattered infrastructure. It also includes some really key guarantees. A promise of no Israeli annexation, and, in a major U-turn from things we've heard before, a pledge against the forced displacement of any Palestinians.
Now, as you can probably imagine, a proposal this huge, this demanding, well, it was met with a whole spectrum of reactions from all over the Middle East and the rest of the world.
The reactions pretty much immediately exposed the region's geopolitical fault lines. No surprise, the Israeli government gave its full support. The deal basically achieves its main war goals. Key Arab states welcomed it. They're desperate for this crisis to end. But for Hamas and Islamic Jihad, that core demand to just disarm and give up all power, that's seen as a complete non-starter.
And that expected rejection from Hamas really gets to the plan's biggest problem. I mean, for all its details, it's hanging by a thread on some massive, unanswered questions that could make the whole thing just fall apart. This, right here, is the single biggest hurdle. The entire deal depends on Hamas agreeing to its own complete dissolution, both as a military force and as a political one. For an organization that has built its entire identity on armed resistance, that is an almost unimaginable thing to ask. And look, even if, just for a second, Hamas were to disappear overnight, you run into another huge problem. So all of this brings us to right now, the immediate future. With the stakes this high and a clear threat on the table, what are the next moves in this diplomatic pressure cooker? Well, there isn't much time to think it over. Hamas has been given an extremely short deadline. We're talking just 3 or 4 days to give its official answer. That puts an incredible amount of pressure on its leadership to make a choice that could honestly decide the fate of the entire region. So the stakes really could not be higher. We are staring down 2 completely different futures. If it succeeds, it could be a true watershed moment.
a chance to finally break this horrible cycle of violence. But if it fails, that likely means a catastrophic escalation of the war, with absolutely devastating consequences for everyone involved.
But if Hamas rejects your plan, Mr. President, or if they supposedly accept it and then basically do everything to counter it, then Israel will finish the job by itself. This can be done the easy way, or it can be done the hard way.
So, in the end, this is the question we're all left with, right? Is this 20-point plan a genuine, workable blueprint for a lasting peace? Or is it just setting the stage for the next, and maybe even more tragic chapter in a very long story of conflict? Only the next few days are going to tell us the answer.